Do you love the look of using word dies for sentiments but want some ideas to make them stand out and pop a bit more? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's take a look. Today I have the Spellbinders and Scrapbook.com exclusive Platinum 6 machine. The exclusive part is that it is this black color. So only at Scrapbook.com can you find a black Spellbinder 6 Platinum, which I personally thought was awesome because I actually have a lot of black furniture in my room. I don't have white IKEA furniture, I have black. So it matches my room perfectly, and I know there's others like who feel similarly. And then I'm going to use some Scrapbook.com word dies because they have a pretty good variety, so I can show you a couple of examples. Scrapbook.com did send me some dies and the machine to share with you. So there are a couple of different types of dies out there. There are dies that have word dies. They cut a word, so in this case it's individual letters to combine to a word, but sometimes if it's a scripty word, they're connected. And then it has a shadow die behind it. And so it results in a look like this, where you have the black shadow, which is the outline of the word, and then the white letters to glue on top. And of course you could change up and do whatever color you want. Then they have some dies that have an inlaid look, which you can create an inlaid look with this or any other die that has shadow dies. But these particular ones, the Hello, Thanks, Celebrate set, the block outlines, and there's also like a block outline holiday version, they actually cut the whole word both as letters and as the outline in one pass. So you don't get a solid hello behind it, you instead get just that outline. You can I'm going to show you in black so it's a little bit easier to see. I've put some mint tape behind them just so that I can demonstrate to you what they look like. And then you would be able to like switch it up where I could put the black letters in the white outline or the white letters in the black to give a similar effect to the ones with shadows. But the one I want to focus on today is dies that do not include an outline. So these celebration sentiments are scripty words and they don't have an outline die to go with them. This can be great because it can be significantly cheaper because you're getting less dies, so you get more words for a smaller price tag. But they don't always stand out as much on your card because they're a little bit more delicate. And sometimes that's totally the look that you're going for. You want a really delicate look. But I'm going to share with you some ideas for when you want to step it up a bit. So I have my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine here. And in case you've never seen die cutting, as I think this is a great beginner video, because if you're just getting into die cutting, you maybe haven't seen some of these tips before, but I just want to show you the basics of how a die cutting machine works. So you're going to need some kind of plate sandwich, and all of these plates will come with your machine. I will be using an additional separate kind of mat, and I'll talk about that briefly, but the Spellbinders Platinum 6, if you purchase it, has all these plates and more that you will need for any combination of embossing or die cutting. So we have the platform base A and the platform top B. What I particularly love about this model from Spellbinders is they actually tell you the sandwiches right here on their universal plate system. And if you have an older Spellbinders machine, my understanding is the universal plate system works in some other machines that didn't come with them. So you can look into that, but I really like that it tells you the sandwiches right here on there because in the past, I've had to print it out and put it next to my die cut machine, and I don't have to do that any longer. So then it tells me I need my platform base, platform top A, and this is just for a basic die cutting, a cutting plate. And these are the Spellbinders cutting plates that come with the machine. I'm going to substitute in a Scrapbook.com magic mat. I think there are some advantages to it. It's a little bit quieter, and it's really great if you're working with embossing dies because it will actually give you a more embossed image because it has a little bit of give to it. It doesn't crack as much as a mat, and so it kind of has a little bit longer of a life, and it's double-sided, just like a standard cutting mat. So you can, use both sides until they're used up, but it's kind of like a self-healing mat. Then you put, according to the directions, your paper or cardstock, your die, and then your top cutting plate. if you want to make sure your die is in a particular place, you can hold it down with a little scrapbook.com mint tape or some other low tack tape. And then you can just crank it through your die cut machine. This is a traditional manual die cut machine, which means I have this crank handle here. Sorry about those lights, but I'm just trying to make sure that you can see as much of the machine as possible. And that means that you will also see the reflection of my ring lights. So, then I run it through. I am finding I am getting really nice clean cuts. And pull that out. You want to be a little bit gentler with scripty words, and you can pop out any of the extras, but it's cutting through really well and leaving a little bit less of those like paper fuzzes, which are totally normal. They're very expected, but a little bit less with this new machine than with my older machines, because they do get, over time, the machines loosen up a little bit, and I find the performance starts to slip just a little bit, even on really high quality machines. So that is the basics of die cutting out a sentiment. So my first technique for making your die stand out a little bit more is to fussy cut a shadow if it did not come with one. So of course you can machine cut it if it did. But if you notice, when I lay this yay word down on here, it's pretty, you can definitely read it. It's definitely readable. But if I take a word that has a shadow behind it, it stands out a lot more. And you can pick whatever color you want. This is a great opportunity to pull in colors from your background, for instance. So if you want to use the dark blue in the background and tie it in, this is a great spot to do it. So you're just going to glue your die cut onto whatever color coordinating cardstock you want to do, and then fussy cut around it just like you would if you were fussy cutting out a stamp. You want to leave as much of an even border around it as possible. But a couple of tips for this: definitely move your scissors more than you move your paper. It's going to zoom in and out a little bit. I'm going to try to keep it in focus so that you can see a little bit more detail, but it's kind of the nature of autofocus is going to try to look for where it should be. My camera, that is. Okay, so there you see how I moved the paper around versus my scissor to try to get into that dip there a little bit. And in general, where you can, I recommend going a little bit tighter into the image. So I probably can't cut down into the middle of the Y. That's probably a little too much detail. And even a lot of your standard shadow dies will not include that much detail. But if you do even just a little indent into that area, it makes it seem a little bit more like professional and finished edge there. And a pair of detail scissors is really important. Some small scissors are not meant to be detail scissors. So if you find you're still getting really rough cuts, it actually may just be your scissors. I personally recommend the EK Success scissors. So you could keep cutting around until you have your own fussy cut shadow. The next thing that you can do is to simply layer two of your die cuts. So again, this black word, very easy to read, but if you just want to add a little bit more pop to it, you can place another die in a contrasting color underneath it and just offset it the smallest bit. And it kind of creates something similar to a shadow, but only on one of the edges of the die. And this is of course going to be difficult to do because I'm doing it on camera, but I promise you it's not that difficult to get that off-cut look. I just should have had it flat on my desk. So, and then you'll see, and I'll show you one that I glued more carefully. It gives it a similar, just a little bit of dimension and more pop off of the card versus a standard sentiment. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about how you can add some dimension and color at the same time. So rather than starting with a black or white die cut, if I started with something like I want to incorporate the pink from this background, it's a little bit hard to read there on that pattern, and you can, try some different things. I think here is a great case for the shadow. I think a shadow would do an excellent job. You can I'll just take a white and a black to show you. So white, almost unreadable, but then when I have the black shadow around it, perfectly readable again. So that's a great way of handling this as well. But I just want to talk a little bit about color dimension as well. So this is a plain piece of cardstock in just pink, but there's some other things that you can do in addition. You can make your own colored cardstock, which is good for many reasons. It can be helpful in terms of if you don't want to, I just need one small die, but I don't necessarily want to cut into a whole sheet of pink cardstock. I don't have any scraps left, or I just don't have any pink cardstock at all, but I do have pink ink. I can blend it. Now, what I would recommend is you could do a solid blend, like just put pink ink right down onto your cardstock, but I recommend to add a little bit of dimension and interest by using more than one color and doing something like an ombre, blending a darker into a lighter, or even if you don't want like the full ombre look, you can start the top and bottom dark and the middle a lighter color, just something so that it's not like a flat color. And I'm working with this, I think it's called a double stick mat from scrapbook.com. I cut mine down because I usually need a smaller surface, but I don't know if you noticed, but like I don't have to hold my ink pad down. Even though I'm rubbing my brush all over it, I don't have to hold my cardstock down. I sometimes do out of habit because I have crafted for 15 years at this point. So for, since I've had distress inks, I used to work on my like Ranger craft sheet and it slid everywhere, but I love this new addition of this silicone sheet that like holds my paper and my ink pad, so I don't need anything special there. And you can keep going until you get whatever kind of blend you want. Then you can die cut it out, but I wanted to point a couple things out. This cardstock is wet with ink. Not very wet, like if I press my hands on it, it's not even coming off on my hands. But it's enough wet that your tape might not stick to it, because your tape is going to pull up the ink instead of sticking. So if you need to be really precise about your placement, wait till your cardstock dries. The other reason you might want to wait for your cardstock to dry before die cutting it is because while the ink didn't transfer onto my hands that I could see, when you put it through the die cut machine and you apply that pressure, the ink might come off on your plate. And then the next time you run a different project through your machine, the ink that is transferred to your plate might transfer to your next project. So it's just something to keep in mind in terms of die cutting wet ink cardstock. So here I have a die cut word that I blended similarly and cut out for you just to save us time here. And then we can see that the stripe paper is still a little difficult, but because the top is a little bit lighter than the bottom, it does make it a bit more readable. Honestly, I'm probably gonna go with the shadow die for this particular card, but that is what I had on hand to show you. Let me see if I can kind of show you the difference on a piece of black cardstock. If you see this is just flat pink cardstock, and then this has the ombre, it just brings a little bit more attention and interest to your die. The next thing you could do is just put a little inking at the edges. So in this case, you wouldn't want to ink the whole cardstock because we're not going to make the entire die cut pink or whatever color. Now, this as a mat, as I told you, a big piece of paper doesn't really slip around on it. A small die cut will a little bit more. So if you are finding any issue with your die cut slipping around on your mat, or you don't have one of these cool mats, though I recommend them. I've quite enjoyed them, especially when I cut it into little pieces and I have like 4 mats so that I don't have to clean them as often. I have a little stack of mats with ink on them a lot. Anyway, I put a little bit of mint tape behind the negative, and then I can pop my die cut back in. You can add more tape if you want to hold it down a little bit more completely. And something like mint tape is great for this because it's very low tack, so I don't have to worry about ripping this delicate die cut. But again, I don't have to worry about holding my my ink pad down. Now, once I get going, I should be fine to not hold my cardstock down either, but the mint tape is a bit more slippery on this, I notice. So I'm just going lightly at the edges, just to add like a highlight as a highlight of color as opposed to a solid bit of color. And you can do whichever one works for you. This is definitely a much more kind of subtle effect. So this is a great way of pulling in a cardstock color. So let's see. Here, if I put the white or the pink down, you can kind of see it just like, it's very subtle, but it ties in that color a bit more. And on black cardstock, you'll definitely see that pink color, and you can kind of build up more color if you want, or you might like the really high contrast of the white, but it's just an idea to get a little more pop from your die cut. This last technique is one of the simplest to do, but it requires a bit of a sure hand in a way. So it's probably not for everyone, but again, want to hold my die cut in place a little bit more just because it can be kind of hard to hold a small die cut like this. So I'll put the mint tape on the back of a negative. I've cut so many of these, I have negatives all over my desk, and fit that in like a puzzle. Then I'm just gonna take a white gel pen and add some highlights as if like on curves and on one side where the curves are. So, you know, just to add like the look of a catch light, or kind of like you think of like a helium balloon where there's a little bit of highlight when those are drawn out because the light reflects off of the mylar plastic of the balloon. So wherever you would think that the catch light might go, you can look up a balloon of the word, maybe that would help you. But I don't worry about it too much. I just kind of put it wherever looks good to me. It's just about adding a little bit of something subtle to the word. And you'll see this a lot with like like Copic colored or alcohol marker colored critters. People will go in and add a little bit of highlight or dots or things like that. And all of those can be a great idea to add a little bit more dimension. And you see it just adds a bit more interest than a flat black die cut. So today we talked about 5 ways you can get a little bit more out of your die cut words and your die cutting machine, like these Spellbinders Platinum 6 Scrapbook.com exclusive black. I am so excited to have that sleek looking machine in my craft room. So we fussy cut our own shadow die for ones that do not have shadow dies. We layered 2 die cuts on top of each other, slightly offset. We added some color with ink, and not just flat color, but a little bit of an ombre or otherwise a blend for some interest. You could do this also with markers or colored pencils, really like any colored medium should do. We inked up the edges a little bit just to bring it out. I think this actually works a little bit better with a darker color. I went for something really subtle today, but you can experiment. And then finally, we added just some white gel pen highlights. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.